Good evening and welcome to the April 15, 2024 regular meeting of the Mayor and Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite our friend Gary Unterberg from Rogers Consulting to lead us in the pledge. If everyone can please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Gary. Next on our agenda is reflection. I'd like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Tonight we have two sets of minutes before us. The first is the work session on March 25th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Move approval of the minutes from the work session of March 25th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or
Abstain, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that carries 4-0 with one abstention, Councilmember Wu. Next, we have the minutes from the regular session on April 1st. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the minutes from the regular session held on April 1st, 2024 be approved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And,
Abstain yet again, Mr. Mayor.
okay, thank you. So that carries 4-0 with one abstention, Councilmember Wu. Next on our agenda is appointments, and tonight we have one appointment and one reappointment to the Police Advisory Committee. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the resolution of the council confirming an appointment made by you and reappointment to the Police Advisory Committee for a 2-year term for Amanda Shepard and a reappointment of David Paulson.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Is anybody here whose name we just read and appointed? Okay, not seeing them here. We will have to thank them when we see them. But participating as a volunteer on one of our city committees is a great way to get involved in the city and contribute meaningfully to the business of the city and provide recommendations, suggestions to the mayor and council, and meet like-minded people and get to know how the city works. So hope you all will consider it. Next on our agenda is presentations, and I'm going to invite Councilmember Harris to join me at the podium as we proclaim Day of Remembrance in the city. You get to read this part.
The Days of Remembrance is an annual 8-day period designated by the United States Congress to help citizens remember and draw lessons from the Holocaust. The period normally begins on the Sunday before the Jewish observance of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and continues through the following Sunday. A national civic commemoration is held in Washington, D.C., with state, city, and local ceremonies and programs held in most of the 50 states. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum was created as a permanent living memorial to the victims and provides materials to help support remembrance efforts.
All right, and I will read the proclamation of the Mayor and City Council of Gaithersburg. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored, systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945, during which 6 million people were murdered. And whereas the United States Congress established this international recognition of the Days of Remembrance, which corresponds to the 27th day of Nisan on the Hebrew calendar and marks the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and the Holocaust Remembrance Day on Monday, May 6th, known as Yom HaShoah. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and to rededicate ourselves to the principles of individual freedom in a just society, Whereas the days of remembrance have been set aside for all people to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as to reflect on the need for respect of all people. Now, therefore, I, Judd Ashman, by the power vested in me as mayor of Gaithersburg, do hereby proclaim the week of Sunday, May 5th through Sunday, May 12th, 2024, as days of remembrance in memory of the victims of the Holocaust and in honor of the survivors, rescuers, and liberators, and further proclaim that we, as residents of the city of Gaithersburg, must work to promote human dignity and confront hate whenever and wherever it occurs. Proclaim this 15th day of April 2024. Thank you, Councilmember Harris, for joining me up here. Let's give him a round of applause. We don't have a picture, so we will just pretend that
Everybody take a mental picture.
Okay. You can hold on. Okay. Next on our agenda is public comments. This is the time that Mayor and Council would like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on any topic other than a public hearing topic. We have our public hearing next. If you're here to speak about retool Gaithersburg, the comprehensive revision to our zoning ordinance, hold off. We're going to do that next. But if you're here to speak on any other thing, this is the time we ask that you come to the podium, state your name and your name and address or neighborhood. Come on up. Keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. If you have more than 3 minutes worth of material to deliver, you can, by all means, use the 3 minutes here and send us the rest in writing. It'll be considered just the same as oral testimony. Please, go right ahead.
Okay, and I timed it, so it's less than 3.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, thank you for hearing us. My name is Raleigh Smith, and I live at 403 Russell Avenue of the city of Gaithersburg. And I'm a member of the coalition that the Gaithersburg Beloved Community Initiative has assembled from Asbury Village, Montgomery Village, residents and homeowners associations, nonprofit agencies, schools, and churches to participate in the Lake Forest development planning. We see this development as such a tremendous opportunity for our city, county, and neighborhood. We are grateful to the city staff for all the keeping us informed of the development progress. This communication is just to report to you that we're still here after working with you to fulfill and maybe even exceed the requirements and goals of the master plan, which we supported. We have studied the schematic development plan submitted by WRS and the staff comments. We are, of course, interested in the whole development, its connection to our neighborhoods, the amenities for families and youth. However, we, as a coalition, are focusing on the housing for our new neighborhood, the number of units, whom it's for, its affordability to assure diversity. And we have been educating ourselves on the city housing element, the comprehensive housing plan, and all the resources available to reach our city's goals. About 50 workers at Asbury Village, where I live, and many others in the surrounding communities have expressed interest in living at Lake Forest with our partners. Housing Initiative Partnership and Safe Places Residents Association, our partners. We are preparing to educate residents and workers how to rent and buy homes, hoping to pre-qualify them for housing at Lake Forest. And we've been urging WRS and their housing partners to use all the public and private, local, state, and national programs available to make these units available to households and many income ranges, the whole range. We envision Lake Forest as a mixed-use and mixed-income community for families living and working in the greater Gaithersburg region. We will see you soon, we hope, at a public hearing for our new neighborhood. And we just wanted to let you know. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Raleigh.
I will follow up from what Raleigh had to say. My name is Spence Limbacher. I also live at Asbury Methodist Village. I'm also the chair of the Gaithersburg Beloved Community, GBCI. I think many of you know who we are and what we do. Our work in the schools and with children and youth in Gaithersburg is really important to us. And we have about 150 volunteers at Asbury Methodist Village who work in those various different programs. As Raleigh said, we have some concerns, particularly about the housing that's going to go in to the mall, to the Lake Forest site. And we've been in discussion with your staff and the planning staff here, and with others about some things we'd like to see included in that, and we will be back obviously to testify. Some of the things that we're particularly interested in the housing is we believe or would like to see at least 20% of the new housing that's built to be affordable. The need of affordable housing is incredible. If you read the testimony from your earlier planning work, you'll see that. We believe that both the new housing, both rental and ownership, should be for families with children, which means that we're most interested in larger bedrooms, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units for families with children, which we believe is where the greatest need is. Only 7% of the city's apartment units are 3-bedroom units, and these units have the lowest vacancy rates in the city of Gaithersburg. Housing challenges are most acute for families with incomes below $40,000, as was in your planning and your housing elements plan. And we believe that those are the people who need housing the most here. We're also concerned that the development provides significant public benefits to the residents, both in Lake Forest, the Lake Forest development, and in the city of Gaithersburg itself. So we urge the city planning department to require the developer provide a building for community activities, which would include meeting space, recreation space, and office space for primarily nonprofit groups. We strongly urge the city planning department and city council to look for creative ways to meet the housing needs of low and moderate income residents, and propose the developer go beyond the present proposal in the types of housing that's being put forward. We look forward to continue working with all of you and coming back to testify when the plan is ready to come to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Ashman and council members. My name is Tim Goodfellow. I live on Boysenberry Drive. I'm with the TAME Coalition, and TAME represents transit alternatives to the Mid-County Highway Extended. Also is
Excuse me, I'd stopped your time. If you want to have a private conversation, as I said before the meeting, please take it outside the room. We want to give respect to all of our speakers here. Please go right ahead.
Okay, I'm with the TAME Coalition, and TAME represents transit alternatives to the Mid-County Highway Extended, also known as M83. We are opposed to M83, and we advocate for transit and other sound and sensible transportation system improvements as alternatives to the M83. So for those in the audience who don't know what M83 is, it's a 5-mile, 60-year-old proposed highway from Montgomery Village to Clarksburg that fails to address modern-day mobility, travel patterns, and environmental awareness. I'm here tonight to share copies of our latest publication with the city. It's entitled A Call to Action, the Foundation, Rationale, and Mandate for Removing Proposed Mid-County Highway Extended from All Master Plans in Montgomery County, Maryland. This was written to and delivered to the County Council, the County Executive, and the Planning Board. It's a summary of the studies, the analyses, and reports that all conclude that M83 highway is too damaging, not warranted, and should not be constructed. The fact is, as long as M83 remains on the county's master plans, it could be constructed at any time. In addition to bisecting 4 county parks, 2 Montgomery Village community open space parcels, the alignment of proposed M83 bisects the city's Blum Park. If M83 is constructed, it will decimate, degrade, and destroy Blum Park. It would be an insult and a dishonor to Richard Blum, the park's namesake. So who wants to experience a park with a loud, polluting, stinking highway running through it? No one. So during the city's Green Month this month, the TAME Coalition is trying to protect green space in the county and in the city. So thank you for the 3 minutes, and may I approach to deliver the document?
Just hand it to our clerk,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
I'm David Winfield. I live in Asbury Methodist Village and am a longtime habitué of Lake Forest Mall. Worked at IBM since 1973, kitty corner across from the development, and my family and I have enjoyed the facilities greatly. I ice skated there, my daughter ice skated there, my son worked in the mall. My children went K to 12, daughter through Gaithersburg High School and my son through Watkins Mill High School. And we have spent many happy moments in the old Lake Forest Mall. And I have an emotional need to see a recreation of what I felt was a vibrant center for our family, which had an amphitheater where we saw many things. My wife and I walked the circuit many times, and I hope for a locus which will draw people in from the periphery and provide housing for the neighborhood and housing for the associates who work in Asbury Methodist Village. I also have an interest in preserving some of the documentation associated with the development of the mall for the use of the civil engineering and architecture class at Watkins Mill High School. I would like to preserve the stormwater development plan, photograph the structures which will later be underground, have documentation of the staging of the development, so that this will essentially be a teaching portfolio at Watkins Mill High School. I also would like to see in the library, which is across the street, a 6x6 board which describes what is in Lake Forest development. Somewhat that would be a duplicate of the brochures which used to be distributed in the center of the old mall. I would like to see this become a sort of a teaching exhibit of how development should occur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect.
Good evening. City Council, my name is Carmen Castro Conroy. I'm here representing Housing Initiative Partnership, a nonprofit housing developer and housing counseling agency serving city residents since 2009 with our foreclosure prevention program, and for the last 10 years with all of our housing counseling, including pre-purchase counseling. I am the honor to be here to advocate in favor of city residents that still have the dream of becoming homeowners. We prepare anyone who may start thinking about becoming a homeowner with one-on-one, free, and personal pre-purchase counseling, where we review their budget, income, expenses, credit reports, and determine their affordability pre-qualification. We've seen in the last few years how many families are farther and away from the dream of becoming homeowners. I'm here to advocate for the expansion of affordable housing any chance the city has an opportunity, not only to go with what the city supports in regards to down payment assistance and the MPDU program, but to expand and go beyond. That's the only way we can alleviate and make a contribution to the hardworking families who are struggling to pay high rents and see themselves further and further away from becoming homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is John Roddy. I live at 415 Russell Avenue. For the last 49 years, I've addressed this body on a great many occasions, but always as a resident of a house that is just 2 doors down from this one on Summit Avenue. We have sold that property, and now I have reinvented myself as a resident of Asbury. I have familiarized myself with the points my colleagues from Asbury have raised with you this evening and previously. I agree with them, I support them. I hope that you will embrace them and implement them to the extent you reasonably can in the future. I think that this is a great opportunity to do the right thing at the right time. You will see that there have been, just in the past week, 2 articles in the Washington Post and the report on Friday from the county executive himself emphasizing that housing, especially affordable housing, is paramount importance. I look forward to working with you folks and city staff on this project and other projects in the future. And as always, I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much, John. Do we have any other testimonies in the room tonight? Not seeing any. I'm going to check Zoom. If anybody on Zoom would like to testify, just use the raised hand function and I'll call on you. Not seeing any. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your testimonies. We really appreciate it. So next on our agenda is, and by the way, with all the testimonies about Lake Forest, we will certainly, when we get to the point where we're having a public hearing, we'll certainly get that information out there and look forward to seeing all of you again on that. Great. I want to invite the Planning Commission to join us up here, and we are about to start our joint public hearing on Retool Gaithersburg.
Yes, sir. New version.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council and Planning Commission. This is the public hearing for application CTAM 9739-2024, the comprehensive repeal and replace of the city's zoning ordinance, Chapter 24 of the City Code, also known as Retool Gaithersburg. The public hearing draft ordinance was released April 1st for public review. The hearing was advertised in the March 28th and April 4th editions of the Washington Post, and notice was published on the city's website, along with the Retool project page. There are currently 33 exhibits in the record, which may be reviewed at City Hall during the regular business hours, or at any time on the Retool project page, retoolgaithersburg.com. Any dispute of the record must be noted prior to the record's closing. Now, I will turn it over to our old friend Joe Halfordy from our chosen consultant ZoneCo, who's going to give the presentation, of which many of these slides you have seen a number of times before. So with that.
Thank you. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Rob, for the introduction. You will certainly have noticed some of these slides before, but we will try and keep this presentation as an overview of the kind of entirety of the zoning code itself. And again, as a reminder of the reasons as to why this initiative is underway and really what the benefits are to the city of Gaithersburg. So starting at the highest level, what is Retool Gaithersburg? Retool Gaithersburg is a comprehensive initiative, really a once in a generation opportunity to provide an update to the city's zoning ordinance to ensure that it reflects not just kind of where the city's come from, but where it wants to grow to in the future, and support the vibrancy and innovation of your city. And this is something that's important for cities after some time to continue to take a look at for a number of reasons, starting with the fact that cities change. And more importantly, as a city changes, the zoning code itself needs to update not where you came from, but what your vision towards the future might be, what current policies and trends are, as well as align with all of the comprehensive planning that your city is doing to support those objectives and goals. And then lastly, zoning in the modern era should be easy to use. It should be something that an administrator or a member of the public can just as easily pick up and can be able to appreciate and understand the development patterns in their city and participate in a public forum regarding that. So the goals of this project, as I just said, are really just to support the residents, businesses, and administrators of your city with a modern, easy to use, and straightforward zoning code. Within that larger goal, the project really seeks to have both technical and policy-oriented goals. So from a technical perspective, this initiative tries to improve the overall organization and usability of the code, incorporate visual aids, and really simplify the readability of the document, something that helps both administrators and members of the public and decision makers alike, and also use more modern terminology and definitions, things that reflect the world that we all live in today, as well as reducing some of the jargon that really kind of acts as a barrier to people being able to participate in zoning and land use. And from a larger policy perspective, the initiative, like I said, seeks to implement many of the objectives of your planning work that has happened to date. So opening up the opportunity for various different types of housing, the ability to infill or adaptively reuse or re-tenant existing commercial structures, and removing equity barriers within your zoning code, all while simplifying the code and improving the regulatory processes. So leading up to here, beginning in early 2023, quite a bit of fairly extensive outreach has been conducted on this project. We won't talk about each of these items as we have included in previous packets a greater degree of specificity on what each of these initiatives resulted in. But I will say that starting in early 2023 with virtual meetings, since then we've taken advantage of both virtual and in-person meetings, the use of websites, surveys, dedicated email addresses, and phone lines to allow for all sorts of digital engagement. All publications as part of this project, from the initial diagnostic report to the calibration table to the draft code, have all been released on the Retool Gaithersburg website and made available for comment, as well as a series of focus groups that really dove into the specific needs and areas of expertise of various different bodies that really participate in your civic life, ranging from land use attorneys to homeowners. And in addition to the outreach, as you will all remember, this is the fourth time we're here to talk about the specifics of this code. Prior to this, there were 3 joint work sessions on October 9th, where we went through the detailed calibration of kind of the roadmap for how the zoning code would be updated, what those proposed changes were, and a summary of the policy items that would make it into the proposed zoning code. In February, we returned to present the draft code that was completed and released on the website, as well as provide a summary of the major policy and technical items that were included. And on March 11th, we provided follow-up based on your questions, comments, and feedback, specifically addressing many of the items where there was robust conversation, things like parking, accessory dwelling units, and the central business district. And with that, we'll give a brief overview of the zoning code itself. So the code itself is split into 16 unique articles. And as Rob mentioned, this was a comprehensive rewrite. So every sentence, every section of the zoning code was touched in some fashion or form, whether it was policy that really worked for you and was retained and updated to just more accurately reflect either the new structure or updated language, whether it was portions of the zoning code that were technically overhauled to provide just a more easy to use format, clearer language, charts and graphs, things like parking or signage, sections that could really benefit from that kind of technical perspective, retool. or items that were addressed from a policy perspective. So areas where the zoning code was falling short on being able to actually facilitate the vision put forward by many of your previous planning documents, things like development standards and how they reflect housing production, or the floating zones and how they can better support kind of progressive planning ideas in your city. So the following slides are really just to show kind of what is included in each of these articles and where we've made substantive changes since the prior joint work session. I'll note those for you all as well. So starting in Article 1, the introductory provisions, this includes key language, including statutory authorities and continuance provisions as they relate to existing applications of permits, overviews of the zoning districts to introduce them and establish them within the code, as well as the zoning map itself. And then a roadmap of the ordinance itself, the actual structure of where different items can be found. So this was changed really to allow for a smooth transition from the prior ordinance to a revised ordinance. It's intentionally designed such that it does not act as a penalty for folks who have previous approvals or are currently in your process while the zoning is being changed or updated. And allows for flexibility in the administration of those types of projects. This also helps for non-professionals to be able to better understand and utilize their code. I will note that since the March joint work session, we have removed the how to navigate this zoning ordinance section, which we had previously discussed, I believe, in February. This is language that, through discussion, we've decided is best lives on the City of Gaithersburg website, where we're going to work collaboratively to put forward something that can be used by members of the public, as well as provide links to all the appropriate documents. Within Article 2, it focuses on interpretation and measurement, and it is an article completely dedicated to how one utilizes and understands the language of the zoning code and how different various development standards are measured. So this is something that by putting all into a single location, it helps to really just streamline the usability of the code rather than having to comb through specific definitions or sections of the zoning ordinance. It puts it all up front in a place that's a concise list of how one goes about using the code. And it clarifies really kind of basic concepts and kind of core concepts to zoning, things like setbacks, yards, and frontages, to make sure that they're used consistently throughout the code. And in doing so, implements, where possible, graphics or tables to really streamline the way that information is shared with people. Since the March joint work session, I will note the code has been updated to provide updates to how the calculation of floor area ratio was previously shown. I believe we said it was to the 10th position, which really doesn't work when you start to implement things like FAR bonuses or rounding generally. So it has been updated to provide that in a more standard way to the 100th place, as well as changes to the graphic legends on some of the diagrams to make sure that they were clearer and more accurately reflected what was being discussed in the text. Okay. Within Article 3, the standard zoning districts, this is really the home of the residence district use tables and development standards, as well as the non-residential district use tables and development standards. So what was changed in this section is really, we've talked about this a number of times, the importance of the comprehensive use tables for all residential and non-residential districts, a place where in one portion of the zoning code you can see what is or is not permitted across the variety of districts that you include in your code. Within each of the districts themselves, there's the inclusion of diagrams and tables to more clearly demonstrate the standards, as well as be able to show what a typical development pattern may look like in a given district, as well as how a particular standard might be applied, whether it be building's height or setback or side yard. And then the dimensional standards for the districts themselves were also revised, which we'll talk about more in a second. Since the joint work session, the use permissions, specifically for banquet halls in the I zones, have been revised. I think that was to not permit them within I zones, as well as added permissions for professional contracting services, a use which through public comment we realized was was not clearly defined, so we've added that to the code. So the district standards themselves, generally speaking, all had a modest revision to either increase lot coverage, height, or impervious area impervious coverage areas, as well as reduce certain elements such as setbacks, as well as align the required lot area with the built conditions that were on the ground today. This is important because it helps to reduce the nonconformance for existing buildings, as well as making it easier for homeowners to make meaningful improvements or enlargements to their existing homes. The change to the development, the standards themselves, this is one of those areas where an update to your zoning code is really important to implement policy decisions that you've made through other planning efforts. So this flexibility to have slightly increased lot coverage or height, it really unlocks the various different types of housing units and housing typologies that you had all previously discussed through things like your housing element, making it easier to create those and removing the zoning barriers to doing so. Within Article 4, the floating overlay and special zoning districts. So this includes all of the existing and proposed floating zones, as well as a single location to distill the information regarding their procedure and use, as well as the overlay and special districts. So the Old Town and Asbury zoning, which was previously located in various different sections of the code, have all been brought into one place to describe all of these more unique, non-standard, if you will, zoning districts. So as I already mentioned, the consolidation of all floating zones into a single article. What this really did, though, is it allowed for us to simplify the process for actually how we describe mapping a floating zone. It also allowed for there to be greater standard between how the findings of one floating zone versus another are demonstrated, and allowed for really just a more concise use of language and not having to explain the process for something very, very similar 5, 6 different times. It also provided the opportunity to more clearly define the Old Town and Asbury special districts, things that were described in different ways, not necessarily the same conventions we would use for your average zoning district or overlay zone within the article itself. So since the last joint work session, this has been updated to also reflect the change to the professional contracting services use, as well as certain clarifications made to the noticing requirements. It was our intention in the initial draft to have noticing be shared amongst residents within proximity to a project. We further clarified that language, as is also in other procedural elements of the code, to just be more specific to say that it's actually the residents, not just the owner or not just the property manager, but really the individuals themselves. So within the floating zones, the MCD zone, the retool effort establishes the MCD zone to allow a certain amount of design flexibility for the redevelopment of non-residential areas, things that would support employment uses throughout your city. As proposed currently, it would have to be designated as an employment node in the housing element. And the development standards themselves are proposed to be established either by city council or the master plan for any height and setback requirements. Within the MXD zone, really just tried to simplify the way that the development standards were shown, as well as clarify open area requirements in the text. Otherwise, the MXD zone has largely remained unchanged. Within the CD zone, and its efforts to help promote redevelopment, on this corridor, incorporates the use of a floor area ratio model, which is based on lot size, effectively allowing for more floor area to be used on larger lots that can accommodate a greater range of development types or a greater range of projects. In addition, to help prioritize the city's goals and promote them, floor area ratio bonuses are also included in the proposed changes. So for projects that would include affordable housing at lower AMIs than is currently required by the code, for projects that would include larger units within residential buildings that would better support families, projects that would include undergrounding of utilities along Maryland 355, or that contribute towards the city's affordable housing goals or towards funds. These projects would be eligible for floor area ratio bonuses. So since the last joint work session, We have clarified how floor area ratio bonuses specifically work. I think it was a little confusing in the code, and through public comment, we have further clarified that, as well as provided examples of how one may be able to take to use, say, even more than one floor area ratio bonus if you, say, include both housing at a lower AMI and larger residential units. And within the CBD zone, the previous proposal sought to permit greater height in the CBD and allow for the Planning Commission to grant height waivers. As you all remember, we had quite a robust discussion on this in March at a joint work session. And the code that's before you today really retains that the building height would be established by the master plan. It also retains the city council's authority to waive the height requirements within the district, but does include findings for the council to consider when those waivers would be granted. Okay. Article 5, use-specific standards. So this is a section that was overhauled largely from a technical perspective, and by virtue of collapsing a lot of uses into more broader categories, there were a lot of use-specific standards that were no longer required in your code, but there are some policy items that made it into this section as well, again, which we've talked about quite extensively at prior joint work sessions. So specifically the inclusion of accessory dwelling units, they live within this Article 5 use-specific standards. So following our last joint work session, the proposed ADU zoning text has been amended as shown here on the screen based on the comments and conversation we had. So first, allowing for the Planning Commission to modify the size and setback requirements of an ADU. This is a mechanism that would allow for an ADU to respond to many of the conditions which you all have highlighted, that there really was not a one-size-fits-all based on the variety of types and lots. So this provides the ability for that modification to ensure that there is kind of a thoughtful dialogue around how an ADU could be implemented on a variety of lot types. We've also clarified the applicability of lot coverage and impervious area rules for both attached and detached ADUs. This was not a departure from a policy perspective from what we had previously talked about, but we wanted to just clarify that further in that an accessory dwelling unit would not necessarily count towards lot coverage, but would towards your overall impervious area coverage, if applicable. Also, based on conversation from joint work session, ADU proposal has been updated to provide for ADUs located above a garage that they can provide the setback of the garage, the detached garage itself, to avoid any conflicts between the two standards, as well as clarifying that the ADU parking requirement is in addition to the parking requirement for the residential use itself. Again, this was our intent in the initial draft, but we've spelled it out much clearer in this iteration just to ensure there's less confusion. Article 6, site standards. Again, this is a section that was largely retained from a policy perspective, and we talked about some of these elements in greater detail at the last joint work session, specifically lighting. So this article was really a reorganization to consolidate what were portions of the zoning that were located across the code into a single article, with things that were amended to align with other policy items, such as detached structures and ADUs, or landscaping and parking lots. We've also included and codified certain lighting standards, which were based on prior practices amongst you all, as well as other best practices for things like outdoor storage or refuse storage on a lot. So since the prior joint work session, the lighting rules have been updated to limit illumination at a property's boundary from both interior and exterior lighting sources. I know this was a conversation that we had that was unclear in the way that the language was previously presented. This would ensure that any on-site illumination is being regulated at the perimeter of the lot, whether it's coming from inside or outside of the building. There was language added to ensure that exterior lighting sources are energy efficient without being too prescriptive as to sort of limit ourselves into the future as to what is or is not energy efficient at any one given time. The language was amended to state that lighting levels are regulated across the entirety of a walkway as an average rather than individual fixtures. This was, again, I think a technical catch where we were talking about the illuminance of a particular fixture that lit a walkway, not the overall effect of how it would affect the walkway. And the last two here, the removal of animal enclosures for accessory structure provisions are just included in accessory structure provisions now. And the ability to allow the Planning Commission to approve non-enclosed outdoor storage areas. So I believe Rob has presented in the past, this is your big box store with an outdoor home improvement center, the ability for the Planning Commission to modify the storage requirement, the outdoor storage requirements that would have required planting or screening elements around there. Article 7, off-street parking and loading. We've talked extensively at the last two joint work sessions about parking and loading. And organizationally, this section includes the requirements for all of the updated uses throughout the code, as well as two unique sections for the individual residential parking. So these are primarily the single-family uses versus larger structured or surface parking lots. So that'd be multifamily or shared parking at a non-residential use, as well as the waiver provisions of your code. So within the article, the general structure was really overhauled to focus more on the use of graphics and tables. But the rates and the implementation of the parking was also changed, and we previously discussed moving from a particular use having a particular requirement approach to something where a requirement was based on a series of uses or a group of uses where it would allow for easier retenanting of non-residential uses into the future, where two uses may not be exactly the same, but their parking needs are effectively the same. The code also separates out the single-family parking requirements, and this is really just a matter of ease of use for the citizens of Gaithersburg, where rather than combing through larger maneuverability standards or complicated parking waivers within the zoning code, really it's one location for something that would really affect the average homeowner within your city. The parking requirements themselves were updated to provide rates for multi-tenant commercial uses. So in a similar vein to the introduction of use groups within your parking, this provides a single category that would have for a a commercial center to provide a parking rate based on how large it is, not how many or how large any of the individual uses within it are, again, to aid in the ability to retenant and adapt those buildings over time. And then also to look towards the future, this draft of the code also included a 1,500-foot bus rapid transit parking reduction. So for any developments within 1,500 feet, roughly a quarter mile of a BRT station, there would be a parking reduction, as well as the findings for the Planning Commission's waivers, just to be strengthened, to be more reliant on data and kind of more objective findings. So since the prior joint work sessions, the BRT waiver was amended to include both stations that are under construction and built. I think this was a bit of a hole in our prior code where we said it had to be a constructed station, whereas with just a few minor tweaks to that language, it gives to the city the ability to say, well, that station is effectively done by the time this approval is done. That waiver can also be applied. And also, based on conversation from the prior joint work session, have amended the Planning Commission waiver of the maximum number of parking spaces to allow for the Planning Commission to require additional parking per the same findings that the applicant would need to make to seek that action themselves. So this was included as well based on our prior conversations. Article 8, signage. So the article includes all of the applicability and permitting for signs, as well as all of the standards for their measurement, their location. Not just permanent signs that you might see on the front of a building, as well as temporary signs are included here as well. So this section provides a clear, concise, and illustrative guide for permitted sign types. And does so through the use of graphics and tables to demonstrate, not only what type of sign, but the scale of sign, the number of signs, and the methods for measuring them. In addition to the conventional signs that are located in most zoning codes or previously in yours, it also includes certain modern sign types, such as projection signs and signs that are popping up now that maybe weren't contemplated during the initial code. I think this is particularly important for property owners, for commercial business owners, to make sure that these rules are clearly stated within your zoning code and illustrated as well, in that it is a very frequent thing for one to need to amend a sign as a building commercial use retenants or as new development occurs. Okay, Article 9, historic preservation. And the articles where not a lot of technical or policy items changed, I'm just going to summarize kind of what's in those articles and provide all of the minor changes on a single slide. I think the first half has really been the big haul, which we've talked about quite extensively so far. So for Article 9, historic preservation includes the purpose and applicability of these rules, as well as how one would go about receiving a historic area work permit, designating a historic site or district, removing said designation, as well as the procedures for demolition or economic hardship. And Article 10 is the nonconformities of your zoning code. So this is nonconforming structures, uses, lots, signs, and parking. And Article 11 is the administrative bodies. So this is both the fees and expenses that are previously listed in your zoning code, but also the roles that various groups such as the Board of Appeals, City Council, Planning Commission, and Historic District Commission play in the development review process. So within Article 9, historic preservation, the current zoning text met the policy objectives of this project, so it largely remained unchanged. It was updated to provide correct references, formatting, and certain procedural elements, as well as updating the demolition procedures for when the Historic District Commission needs to review a project. I believe we may have had that. We had an error in the prior draft. We've since revised. Article 10, nonconformities. There was no need to update the nonconformity policy of your zoning code, but we did see the ability to kind of consolidate those provisions into a single article. Previously, nonconforming uses were located one place, nonconforming parking was located in another. This really brings all of them together into one location regarding all nonconformity within your zoning code. And the administrative bodies consolidated the roles and responsibilities of the various bodies in the code, but it didn't change any of the authorities or the specifics of those roles. It was an opportunity to take certain things such as variance or appeals procedures and move them to the procedural aspect of the code, but not necessarily change the way that they're administered or the fact that, that how they were being administered. In Article 12, permit and review procedures. So this article is the complete list of every action, every land use action that can come before you all as decision makers within the city of Gaithersburg. It's everything from the process for, creating or amending the master plan down to building permit. By putting all of these sections into one single article within the code, it gave us the ability to create a more consistent approach to establishing the requirements, the authorities, and the process, as well as appeals for each of these actions. And there were also certain actions such as annexation that were not previously referenced. The process for them wasn't expressly stated in the code. It gave the opportunity to put that forward as well. And simplify through kind of informational organization, things like noticing requirements or submission standards for various different types of applications. So since the prior joint work session, the clarification here, similar to the floating zones that I mentioned before, with the noting procedures where we would just express more clearly that noticing would be done to each resident, not just to the owner of a property or property management. Okay, Article 13, affordable housing, including the affordability requirements, the design requirements, waivers, and the administrative regulations for this article. Article 14 includes adequate public facilities. including traffic impact studies, school capacity, water and sewer, fire and emergency, and Article 15, enforcement. So rules pertaining to violations and penalties, as well as how they're remedied. Within these sections, much like nonconformities and similar sections, the zoning text itself met all the policy objectives. So it was retained but updated only to provide correct references, formatting within the code. Enforcement, much like the nonconformity section, previously there was language spread throughout the code regarding how it was enforced. This article really just brings it all together into a single location to consolidate that for ease of use. And Article 16, the last article of your code, the definitions, contains all the definitions that were previously located throughout various sections of the code. But since the prior joint work session has been updated and amended in a few different ways, so for the amended definitions, these are things that we, through conversation, through further review, and through public comment, realized there was greater need to clarify. So definitions for floor area ratio, hotel, lot coverage, off-premises signs, ancillary and principal signs, and front, rear, and side yard were all amended, not in ways that would change the kind of policy intent of how the text that was previously provided to you all, but in ways that just further reinforced that and made sure it was clearer. There were also several definitions that have been added since then, things that were just not included in prior drafts, but are required for well-functioning code, such as the definition of a basement. Further clarifying the different types of dwelling units to make it abundantly clear, what constituted a single-family unit or versus a multifamily unit. With the inclusion of the professional contracting services as a use, a definition is also provided to facilitate that, as well as professional services, special events, sign face, which is language used to describe the measurement for the signs themselves, some other signage-specific definitions here as well, warehousing as a use within the use code, and parking structured and covered, which is now kind of a larger organizing principle for your code, but was previously undefined. So these have all been added since the last joint work session. And with that, I'll give next steps.
All right. So before I read off staff's recommendation for the records, I do want to note we have retained April 16th, tomorrow, Tuesday, as a continuance meeting for tonight's joint public hearing if the council and the commission does find it's necessary. We also have retained May 13th as a joint work session. Again, it's as necessary. By no means do you have to do those two meetings, but we wanted to have the flexibility in case the further discussion was needed. And with that, staff does recommend the Planning Commission close their record on June 7th at 5 p.m. with recommendation at the Commission's June 19th meeting. And staff recommends the Mayor and City Council close their record June 28th at 5 p.m. with policy discussion during the Mayor and City Council's July 15th meeting. And that concludes our presentation. Rob, Joe, myself are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Greg. Rob, Joe, appreciate the presentation, appreciate all the work that's gone into getting us where we are now. I'm excited about this product, but also excited to hear from the public. Neil has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question relating to FAR that came up in a discussion about a potential development, which was, the FAR is the ratio of the enclosed space, multiple floors times the square footage, whatever, of the proposed building versus the size of the lot. The question is, what's the definition of the lot size? Where does it end? Is it the usable lot size? Is it the owned lot size? Apparently it's different in the case of one particular development at least. They have a sidewalk that has been dedicated to public use, but they still own it and they still have to count it when they deal with banks and tax people and so forth. So where does the definition draw the line?
So in the definition of lot, it's really within what is the taxable parcel. I know, without going into detail, the discussions that are coming there, you've seen some comments in the record, that some applicants or some commenters wish to apply previously dedicated land into their lot size for the purposes of FAR. Again, we don't support that. Our numbers for our base FAR were based upon an analysis of every property on the corridor, not including previous dedications. In fact, some of the properties that were noted that did previous dedication, they received site plan approvals like in the 80s. There was lot coverage requirements there. They didn't include the land that had been previously dedicated in those calculations. So there's no precedent for giving additional bonuses for land that was dedicated sometimes in the 60s, sometimes in the 70s. We can be talking about third and fourth generation property owners. So we felt all along as we moved into this FAR model, because as we had talked about over years, a number of discussions of carrots and sticks, helping to do something along the corridor, and this might be a way, that we weren't going to include that. If the discussion is we need to include previously dedicated land, I would offer them we have to go back to the drawing board because we have to reestablish the base FARs that build into that. And in fact, the base FARs then would probably drop. And again, with some of these other properties, the questions we would ask at that point is, well, do we now include that for forest conservation calculation purposes and stormwater? Because this was land that was dedicated, but wasn't treated for any of those things. But now if you want to do it to increase your buildable density, you should also have the obligation to mitigate the impacts of it. Staff is of the opinion we want to keep FAR as we proposed. We believe that base FARs make sense. Again, we don't have to rehash the analysis from October that we included. But I think that that's sort of where we sit with this stuff. So while technically under law, if somebody abandons a right-of-way, the property that originally dedicated that land does get right of first refusal for that. They don't actually own that land any longer. That is not theirs. It has been transferred. They don't pay taxes on it. They don't maintain it. That is outside. So for the definition in here of lot, that was part of the thing that was amended along with lot coverage. But it is truly what is in your taxable tax line that you pay taxes on to SDAT.
So is that what you just said, the last part, is that true in all cases? Because the particular property that was under discussion, they believe that they still were technically owning it and paying
We
taxes.
actually have gone in and looked, and that is not true. The sidewalk actually is outside of their property line.
All right, I wanted to make sure that we were treating all properties consistently.
That is our goal. Part of the equity goals of this is everybody gets treated the same objectively, and that there's no unnecessary carrots. Everything is earned.
All right, and no broccoli.
No broccoli.
All right, thanks.
Questions, comments, or should we go to the public? Okay. All right. Well, this is the time when the Mayor and Council and Planning Commission would like to hear from anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this public hearing topic. Same rules as before. We ask that you state your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. We will take written submissions for anything beyond that. Do we have anybody who'd like to testify tonight on our zoning code? Okay.
Hi, hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Demetrius. I live in the Gateway community of Gaithersburg. I also work right outside the city. I just wanted to firstly express support of the Retool project. I think that in general, it's advancing a lot of good goals, and I appreciate the work that you guys have done in making it approachable for the average person. I can say that I think you've succeeded in that. I've been able to understand, as a layman, most of what has been said there, and even if there's something that I don't understand, it's they're terms that I can easily look up, and I don't need a PhD to understand. So I really appreciate that part. My only thing is that I do have two things that I want to comment on. I wish that the council considers lowering parking minimums just in general. I gave written testimony by email, but I think it's important to reiterate that we really don't need. There's already a lot of parking in a lot of Gaithersburg, and I think that especially for affordable housing, if we're going to build more of it, people in lower incomes, speaking myself, tend to have less cars in general anyway, and so requiring parking spaces for affordable housing, I feel like just puts a barrier that's completely unnecessary, especially with how the region as a whole wants to go forward, relying less on cars and more on public transportation and more forms of active transportation. And the other thing is density and setback requirements. I think that we really need to go less on single-family homes and developments like that, and we really should be encouraging more density. Townhomes, I think the Kentlands is a great example of what that nice, gentle density can look like. And I feel like we need to be creating more of those communities and phasing out those older communities that are at this point really only available for people who are making, six-figure salaries at this point. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. David, come on up.
Good evening, y'all. David Mullins, also Gateway Community, and I want to echo some of the early comments that we just heard, which is that I think this has been a very engaging process throughout. I think some of the major goals of accessibility are I like that they're at the forefront. I think they're being met. And as just a member of the public who's not super familiar with zoning code and law, I feel like I've been able to access staff and the council on this whole thing. So thanks for that. Speaking to that, I just remain a little curious about one provision which I reached out to Rob Robinson about and heard right back. And as usual, very responsive. And it was this faith ZTA that passed the county council. I was just curious if there was a similar provision that was going to be incorporated here to try to help innovate in housing and allow faith communities to build housing. I got a great response to help me understand that a lot of that has to do with a lot of our churches are in employment nodes. So, I see how the feasibility may not be just obvious on its face, but I just, kind of remain curious about hearing from, my colleague Carmen at HIP and also the folks at Asbury about how we really want to innovate. The housing element, really wants us to innovate. And I get if it may not be apparent that certain known faith communities can build large multifamilies on them. But, as a lot of the scripture across faiths really calls for innovation when it comes to the poor too, I wonder if there's really just no harm in considering incorporating it for future use. I don't know that we're aware of necessarily all the faith communities that are out there. Maybe some more could be engaged, but if it's able to work that in. But that was my only kind of overall question. And then, also, and I will just do one note too, is that let's remember too, when I hear news about the housing market in general, there's a lot of push to keep your home. And even some folks I know are looking to pay, two mortgages with the rent from one place and this sort of thing. But there's just not a lot of discussion about becoming a landlord. And, people are not being sat down and putting through. Where a faith community, often has a council, a vestry, they have a kind of a set structure that maybe is just maybe a little easier to walk into being a responsible landlord too. Just another point of consideration. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else here who'd like to testify? Not seeing any. Let me just go to Zoom. Tech team, if you could bring up Phil Hummel, that would be great. Phil, just when you unmute, just state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Philip Hummel of Mouth and Stockbridge. I'm testifying on behalf of our Rockville Office of Zoning and Land Use Practice. I want to start by thanking city staff for their hard work through this process. We have submitted written comments on the current draft of the new zoning ordinance, which is Exhibit 32 in the record. We believe all our comments are worthy of the city's consideration, but we want to highlight 3 areas tonight: transition provisions, calculation of FAR, and streamlining development review. First, on transition. Regulatory consistency and predictability are critical for development review, especially for projects with a multi-step approval process, which you see in the CD zone and MXD zone. Despite best intentions, there are always unintended consequences from a zoning ordinance rewrite. Because of this, applicants for active projects should be able to have a choice when it comes to continuing under the old code or the new code. For example, if a project receives sketch plan approval in the MXD zone under the old zoning ordinance, there should be an option to proceed under the old zoning ordinance for schematic development plan and final site plan. Similarly, applicants seeking to amend previously approved plans should also have the choice to proceed under the new code or the old code for a certain period of time, as long as the plan is still valid. These transition policies are consistent with Montgomery County and Prince George's County, both of which have recently revised their zoning ordinances. Next issue is calculation of FAR. This is an issue in the CD zone, which applies to many properties along the city's important MD 355 corridor. We strongly believe that land previously dedicated for no or only nominal consideration should be included when calculating the amount of allowable density. It is important to remember that a property owner retains title to previously dedicated land and should be able to draw density from it. Excluding such land from FAR would make the city an outlier jurisdiction in the metropolitan DC area, and not in a good way. This seems inconsistent with the policy goals of Retool Gaithersburg. And lastly, streamlining. Streamlining the approval process has been identified as a fundamental policy goal of Retool Gaithersburg. We think there are additional ways to support this important objective. First, the city should keep the ability to amend sketch plans and the Planning Commission's authority to amend schematic development plans. We think the new code should allow for the simultaneous review and approval of different application types, like having a sketch plan amendment reviewed and approved together with an SDP plan, a schematic development plan amended also together with a final site plan approval. This concurrent process is done in other jurisdictions. Lastly, expand the eligibility for minor plan amendments that can be approved by staff. This was recently done in the city of Rockville. Thanks again for your consideration. Please let us know if we can be of any further assistance, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate it. And I'm not seeing any other hands on Zoom. Do you have a testimony? Come on up.
Need a few minutes to breathe here. On this greetings.
Well, we need you to state your name
Yeah,
and
sure.
address. Go right ahead.
Sure. Pam Playstead, and I'm in Gaithersburg.
Great.
And on this tax day, I'm not an economist, but please recruit high-paying non-pharma and non-government jobs to Gaithersburg. I'm not a prophet, but events as the attack on Israel by Iran and the recent collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and too many unnatural disasters in the last few years appears not to bode well for the U.S. Gaithersburg taxpayers may be adversely impacted through Retail Gaithersburg. Please don't jeopardize the city's fiscal ratings. Man, I need to breathe. I'm not a historian, although my father, who fought in the Battle of the Bulge and liberated concentration camps, he didn't share much, but he said he saw lampshades made out of human skin in the German officers' quarters, which has indelibly impressed upon me never again. Perhaps one could say that I'm an artist because I'm connecting some dots to the demise of freedom and choice in America in the guise of seemingly altruistic plans such as Retool Gaithersburg and Thrive 2050. Please consider the enemies of America, namely the enemies of freedom. Would love to see the demise of America, including the suburbs and single-family homes and motor vehicle ownership. Imposing biking and public transit removes freedom, even what most in this room consider normal. The freedom to drive, to go to Costco, and pick up 30 rolls of toilet paper. Are you willing to give up your car? The enemies of freedom are like the swindlers in the story of the emperor's new clothes, deceiving by promoting the latest and greatest. And yet, those against freedom are working in lockstep to convince governments to rezone. The Cloward-Priven strategy, named after two Columbia University professors, is a strategy which, quote, aims to utilize militant anti-poverty groups to facilitate a political crisis by overloading the welfare system via an increase in welfare claims, forcing the creation of a system of guaranteed minimum income and redistributing income through the federal government. Talk with Gaithersburg residents who fled tyranny. They will tell you how grateful they are to be in America, where they can work hard in a merit-based, colorblind society. And they would never want the potential to be enslaved to the government, even a nice one like Gaithersburg, by receiving government handouts, even if it seems as innocuous as, quote, affordable housing. Look into Agenda 2030, AKA the Great Reset. The marketing slogan is, quote, in 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy, unquote. See Rosa Corey's work, Uncovering the Corruption, at rosacorey-bmg.com, and see 5-minute videos at prageru.com in order to avoid regrets. Many who have lived under totalitarian regimes have warned the U.S. is currently involved in a cultural revolution. Maybe I'm Paul Revere, I don't know. Please consider changing the dates to vote and notifying all residents via postcards about these plans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other testimonies? Okay. Not seeing any on Zoom. Okay, Jim, you wanted to follow up on some?
I just wanted to ask about the question about the giving the applicant the choice to continue under the previous rules, particularly if a sketch plan has already been approved and they're kind of in the process already, whether we would need to make them
So here's
switch
where I
under
think it is. Currently, right now in retool, we say, you have up until the effective date to apply an application, and we'll honor the zoning code as currently written up to the effective date. Our concern, this idea that you extend in perpetuity, we have projects such as Crown that are 14 years in. How many years are we to retain the old zoning ordinance? Why did we go through this effort if we're not going to have a cutoff date? What we've written is, your previously approvals, we're going to honor everything with that. We honor your density, we honor your heights, we honor your uses. There's no reason then that we should then therefore have to make every subsequent plan, still abide by, because we said, we're honoring the main tenets of your approvals. So it shouldn't be an option. We're giving you an option now. If we go through this process successfully, and hypothetically the effective date off the top of my head is August 5th, if you don't want to go under retool, submit August 4th. If you want to go under retool, submit August 5th. And even these projects that are these longer-term, decade-long phase projects, you're not losing anything. Your final site plan is going to have to abide by under the final site plan. If you have an approved SDP that was preliminary subdivision, we have to honor that. So, that may even be more restrictive than a new final site plan under retool, because you've already laid out your lots and everything at that earlier one. So that's really the case. I think a lot of the comments that we hear is, well, the county does this, the county does that. We're not the county. We wrote a zoning ordinance for the city of Gaithersburg, the context of the city is Gaithersburg, and in our opinion, what is in the best interest for the residents, businesses, and the government of Gaithersburg. So that's really where we came from. So we just don't feel it's realistic to keep the current zoning ordinance potentially on the books for 20-some years.
No, and I would agree with you there. I think maybe the way I was hearing the gentleman's testimony just now was making sure that once you've started, that you have an approved...
We've said anything that started, but if you have an approved sketch, you have an approved sketch. We're not taking that away. I guess what they're saying is they want to retain the right that if you got an approved sketch in the 90s, everything going forward, including now, if you haven't submitted a final site plan for one aspect of it, you get to be under the current zoning ordinance after the effective date. 3 years from now, if you want to do an amendment to final plan off that final plan, you get to do it under the current zoning ordinance. All we're sort of saying is if we went through this effort, let's draw the line when it's time to start implementing retool without taking away your previously approved rights that you got from your approved plans.
Okay. Before, we're going to get to you in a sec, Rob. I just wanted to follow up on David Mullen's question about the faith ZTA at the county level. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. On the screen, if you have it, is Exhibit 18, which was my response. So the county passed a law, and again, this is the difference between county and city. The county has different housing challenges. It also has larger mega churches, things like that. When I received Mr. Mullen's comments, I looked through. Again, many of our churches are smaller and they're leased spaces, so this isn't even an option. Some of the larger ones, again, some of them are located in our employment nodes, and as we identified and as was approved under the Housing Master Plan, those areas aren't appropriate for residential. The other ones that we have is the two big ones is on the Frederick Avenue corridor. There's already CDs of. They can put in housing anytime they want. They just got to come in and go through the plan approvals. So we felt contextually, what occurred in the county doesn't occur here, so it's not apples to apples. Where housing is appropriate, from a greater policy level, the churches we have here can come in. There's nothing in the zones that they're in that precludes them from putting housing on there. That's a personal choice of the religious institution. It's not a regulatory facet that's being precluded by us.
Gotcha. Rob Wu.
Doesn't that violate the First Amendment or Establishment Clause? How do we... Anyway, that wasn't my question. I was just... Mr. Mayor, so just... I don't know how to tee this up. And so a few of us have been discussing with staff kind of the issue that Jim was just bringing up about these vestiges of approvals of bygones, and how do you ensure that the code adequately respects that which has been approved, but also provides for kind of a streamlined way of addressing plan approvals and subsequent plan approvals in the future when, you know, they may be in a different context, which is kind of what I was hearing from Rob in response to Jim. And so the issue that I had seen that I was asking for thoughts on and was addressing with staff was this concern that I have about basically in the way our code is currently drafted and the way Retool is proposed to be drafted. Sketch plans, schematic development plans have no expiration, whereas final site plans have a 2-year expiration. And so the thought I was coming up with is, you know, kind of with respect to these plans from the 90s or something like that, that are just sitting on the books and nobody ever wants to take action on them. What I was really thinking is ways to incentivize quicker action, but in talking to staff, I recognize the countervailing point to that is that a lot of these larger plans are years and years in the making, and they take a heavy lift in doing so. And so, and correct me if I get this wrong, Rob, is where I think I landed with staff is a kind of a comfort level to address those vestigial plans, but allowing for those larger, longer-term plans to kind of work their way. And so I'm comfortable with, and I want to discuss with council today, placing a time limitation on schematic development plans. And so basically the way it would be is that sketch plans, once approved, would not have a time limit on those. Schematic development plans, I would like to suggest that Retool addresses kind of a mechanism that puts some cap on it. And what we had come up with, and again, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as what we had discussed, was for schematic development plans, once approved, I'm proposing a cap of 10 years for the applicant to obtain final site plan approval. And if final site plan approval is obtained, but later, after the 2-year period expires, that plan expires, or if the final site plan is rejected and the 10 years expires, that the schematic development plan then expires.
So to follow up, so this was something, and you know, candidly, staff has discussed this with council multiple ways over the years. There's two things at play. If there is a sketch plan and then a schematic development plan associated, then a final site plan that's been built, all those plans under Maryland state law are vested. So really what Councilmember Wu is talking about is projects that only have SDP approval but aren't vested because no final site plan. And historically, without naming names, we all know this is essentially a lot of times what the flippers do. You know, they'll come in, buy a piece of land, do the plans, get it engineered, and hope to flip it. And sometimes they sit forever. The economy goes this way. So what Councilmember Wu and in fact Councilmember Hernandez separately, you know, we've had discussions with. What we said is, you know, after Retool new applications, it would be too difficult to try to make this retroactive, and we don't have that many projects, to be candid, that this would apply to. And the ones that we sort of do, we knew they were going to take a while. The Kentlands Market Square and you know, Kimco up at Travis Avenue, we're not looking to end those projects. But going forward, what the discussion is, if you get SDP approval, you know, you have essentially 10 years, as Councilmember Wu mentioned, to get to a final site plan. And if the final site plan is denied or expires, what we're saying is if you don't hit those marks, the SDP has to come back into a process for a reauthorization or re-review. If the dais is supportive of this, we'll work out the details, because we could go either under how we're working amended SDPs, or we can make them just, you know, go through the entire process once again. But if it's one of these things where we still, you know, the council or the planning commission still think there's value, maybe the amendment process is a little bit easier and less time consuming to do that. But this essentially puts people on notice. And to council members Wu's point, this now, if somebody's going to submit this application, they have to do it knowing that they've got to get traction on it. But 10 years, we feel is fair. The state says you have to review a master plan element every 10 years. There's other things that we know. So the decade wasn't necessarily, a shot in the dark. We're sort of basing it on things. And, at times, to get through, to get your financing, to all this other stuff, we feel it's realistic. You should be able to get to a final site plan within a decade of your approval. Otherwise, there's something, either fundamentally wrong with your plan, or it's something that, to Councilmember Wu's thing, deserves another look. So that's sort of what we were talking about as a potential change after this public hearing, but prior to the Planning Commission recommendation. We did not recommend this for sketch plans, because essentially sketch plans are bubble plans, and they're meant to be the broadest and widest. And again, with our proposal, going back to the work session that we had in July, as was mentioned on the phone call, we don't allow them to be amended anymore. You should know what you want at the sketch level. If you want to make changes, go through the process and get a new sketch plan. So, SDP is really where we're sort of zooming in on, because as was mentioned, final site plans have a shot clock. You have 2 years and only the ability of a 1-year extension. So you only have up to 3 years to get your plat and get your permits and get something in the ground. So if that sort of summarizes, the various conversations, you gentlemen had with staff, that's sort of where we're sitting. We can support this. We think, it's not a bad thing.
Jim.
So, Rob, under this situation, if somebody had submitted a sketch plan prior to the implementation of Retool, would the previous rules be grandfathered in until the completion of that SDP? Or are we saying that you have to have an SDP that has been approved before the implementation?
So there's two separate things. So this would be after the effective date. So again, not off the top of my head, but hypothetical purposes, let's all imagine August 5th is the day everything goes in. You submit an SDP anytime up to August 5th, you're under the current zoning ordinance, and you have 2 years to get into the process. If you submit something and you drag your feet for 2 years and don't really act on your application, then you're going to have to abide by Retool. So we thought that was fair. This is another one of those sort of line in the same, why are we going to go through this effort if we don't plan on using this ordinance? So we've given everybody who applies any application prior to the effective date 2 years to get to a decision-making process. Doesn't necessarily say it has to be approved. You just got to get into the public hearing process or get before Planning Commission or something like that within 2 years if you want to stay under the old zoning ordinance. What this is saying, what Councilmember Wu's proposition is after the effective date. You submit an SDP after the effective date, after this hypothetical August 5th, you have 10 years to get to a final site plan.
I mean, I think that's reasonable. I could definitely support that. I'd love to hear what the commissioners think about that.
John?
Knee-jerk is I've been in favor of an expiration date on STPs for a long time. And I'll defer to you all for the term, but I'm all in favor of that, yes.
Lisa?
Thank you. I like this. Councilmember Hernandez and I had talked about this briefly prior, particularly for housing. In the crisis that we're in, it doesn't look like it's going to wrap up anytime soon. People are sitting on property that could be housing. This is a way to get out of it. Question I have is, and it's technical, if a person is 5 years into an SDP and at that point their final site plan is rejected, do they have another 5 years? Or
no, the 10 years is the 10 years.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Okay.
We're not envisioning that if you got an SDP and you submit for a final site plan within 2 years, but for some reason it doesn't happen, you're done. No, you, just like applicants now, at times if they have an application and it doesn't quite go as well as they have the ability to redo the application, learn from what the policy decisions were, and then resubmit.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously I'm supportive of it as well. A clarification or maybe a better understanding on the grandfathering mechanism, which is once its effective date comes in, if there are SDPs pending, does the shot clock start for them so they get the 10 years from that effective date? That's how you're thinking about grandfathering them, or they're indefinite?
So help me out, because I'm a little bit confused with what you're what you're asking me.
Sometimes I confuse myself.
No, that's all right. So we're not talking about vesting. So when you're talking about grandfathering, are you talking about if they get submitted prior to the effective date?
Or if there are any that are not vested but previously submitted, and has, are there any, I don't know what the current.
So again, this goes back to what we were discussing, that
Right.
if they were previously submitted before the effective date, they are under this zoning ordinance, the current zoning ordinance, but only for 2 years.
Right.
So this 10-year thing only comes into effect for those applications submitted after the effective date.
Okay.
So there's actually a shorter shot clock to stay under the current zoning ordinance
Right.
for an SDP if you submit now. Basically, you get, the balance to the effective date plus 2 years. You
Okay.
submit after the effective date, you get 10 years.
Okay. I'm supportive.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could count the numbers here. It seems like there's
Yeah, I think
momentum
even,
for that.
we have pretty good guidance on this one,
Yeah.
so I think we know what we're doing.
But I would add two kind of quick little subtleties to it. One of the things to come back with is a clear indication of what the impact of an amendment would be, an SDP amendment.
Yeah.
So does that essentially restart the clock, give you 2 years? What does that look like?
Well, I think, and if we could take a moment, I think that's really the question that is hanging out there for staff and how to best craft this. Do you wish to handle this as a reauthorization where the options are you get to extend, and I guess as a condition you could put how many more years extension, or we can start it with another 10, or so it's almost a binary answer. You reauthorize with X number of years, or you require them to come in with a new SDP and start the process anew.
That's a different question. So that's the second part. The first part is, though, you know what an SDP amendment looks like. There's a change in market, there's a change in what they want to do for density. And the SDP may already have 10 years on it, and they come in and they want to change the numbers. That's cool, we do it, or look at it. You guys decide if it's a minor one or not, and who's going to look at the public hearing. Will that, I'm not asking for an answer this moment, but just make sure that has a framework for either being an amendment to a plan that still has a 10-year term to it, and it may be partway through the term, or the amendment may include part of the deliberation of the amendment is an additional term, but it isn't necessarily, formula. It's just whatever the public hearing or the.
I understand, and I just want to reiterate once again, sort of under retool. Remember, based upon our July work session, we're changing the amended SDP process, because through the analysis that we did, the bulk of them were always deemed minor, so we've changed that. There is no amended SDP process. It would go immediately to final site plan before the planning commission, and then get the approval. So with that, then you start a 2-year clock on that final site plan, and if the final site plan gets approved and it gets built, you vested the SDP, because that's the way state law works, if you have that. So the only real amendments to SDPs, we've limited down the number, but they are more dramatic changes. So what we said, is again, there is no option for planning commission to make a decision. Planning commission will hold the public hearing, but then it comes back to the council for the final decision. So I understand where you're coming from, but that's sort of the subtle difference that we have now.
The second piece to that would be if somebody is simply applying for an extension. They're not changing the substance of the SDP, but like a site plan, they would come back for a 1-year extension. Is there a mechanism for that on an SDP?
We have not considered that, and I think that would be a question that we'd have for the dais. Is that something that these bodies would like us to consider? We want to have this clear guidance on the scope, so when we come back and revise this for planning commission, we're there.
From my perspective, very flexible on the mechanisms, but the concept would be to allow the adjudicative body to come in and take a look. And so, if at an extension, at some level, whether it's staff or planning commission or mayor and council, somebody's taking a look to see if this is a viable plan that is being pursued, that may be hitting some hiccups for whatever reason. Those are the ones that I originally I wanted to incentivize, but I'm okay with that. It's really the stale plans that are sitting there and will never get acted on that are the ones that S or get off the pot, kind of.
Because remember, is this like a mechanism to trying to prevent like gaming of the system where it gets to a 10-year and you do a very minor piece to it, so that way that deliberative review would prevent that kind of gaming because there's like a piece of it. Is that where
I think I would not want form over substance as far as what the process is. I would be wanting the substance. Whatever the process is, it's to address that. Admittedly, it seems like it's a very few and far between issue, but staving it off now, I think, helps put folks on notice. You're coming to Gaithersburg, you're serious about building, you're going to build. And so gaming the system would not be part of that
Does this answer the question, does this give you the guidance you're looking for? Okay. Because I forgot the question.
Can they put in for an extension? What I'm hearing is, we can save that extension for the reauthorization review. At that point, they can make the request at the 10-year mark.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, I have a procedural question. So tonight, we were to vote on holding the,
No voting.
okay.
No, it's the record.
Record.
We're opening
the record
But,
the formal record here.
but this will go in as a part of retool.
Yes, we have the ability still to do amendments. We'll still be receiving comments, as Greg mentioned with our recommended record. So there still could be additional changes, but we wanted to go into tonight knowing that this was a topic. We wanted to get some clear guidance from the council and the planning commission to at least know this is one edit we have to make. There still could be stuff that gets submitted into the record. We go, this is a brilliant idea. Why didn't we come up with that? Usually what occurs is when we go to planning commission recommendation, much as I did a memo that documented the changes from the joint work session drafts to the public hearing draft, we would do another memo that documents any and all changes from the public hearing draft to the planning commission recommendation draft.
So procedurally, we're going to hold the record open, and this will be a part of that record that the public can, okay, all right.
Jim?
So would this be considered a more restrictive version of what was advertised to the public? Would we have to hold another public hearing?
We're in a public hearing. We're good.
We're in a public
Okay.
hearing, so it counts. Great.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah, well done. Okay, so you have guidance. In terms of the need for future sessions, number one, I don't think we need to continue this public hearing to tomorrow, which was one of the options. But I think there is a question about, do we want to have another joint work session on this topic on May 13th? And if I were to, I'm not sure that we need to, though. Other than, we could see the language that's drafted to add this amendment about the new shot clock on SDPs. But I don't know that we need to have a hearing or a work session on that. Because that's really the only, we've had 3 work sessions on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, just as a new person in, what kind of, if we had 100 public comments or 20 contentious issues, that seems to me like the type of things that would lead to extending and continuing. How else does it manifest? I feel like we've covered a ton of ground.
Well, I think it's a question of whether we feel like we fully understand what's before us.
Yeah, I think.
And the public's had a chance to comment on it.
So when I was writing decisions for the GAO, my favorite quote of myself was I put in a decision quibbling with the minutia. And I would say that they've done such a good job of leading us to here that anything else in the future would be quibbling with the minutia.
Okay, John?
How do you top that? Here's how I would separate. Here's how I would separate. So, to be clear, I want to make sure we're clearly leaving the core policy decisions to the council. So I think we have enough to move forward with a recommendation to the council. If you want to keep your record open to address any of the terms of those policy decisions, I don't think that would change our fundamental discussion about moving forward.
Okay. All right, so I'm hearing from that I don't think we need that additional joint work session.
Okay. There will be no complaints from this table.
Okay. So we'll go to the staff recommendations. John?
All right, so staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their record open until 5 p.m. on June 7th, 2024, that's 53 days from now, with anticipated recommendation to the Mayor and Council on June 19th, 2024. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor, it's all yours.
Okay, our recommendations that we hold our record open until 5 p.m. on June 28th, with anticipated policy discussion and final action on July 15th. What is the pleasure of the council?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is from the mayor and city council. Thank you, planning commissioners.
Thank you.
We're going to start from the mayor and council with Councilmember Neil Harris.
So, everybody's leaving. So that's okay, because what I was going to talk about today is not the most fun part, but since we talked about Holocaust remembrance, I'd like to just make a few extra points. First of all, it's probably not widely known, but my Hebrew names are Nuchem Herzl, and those two people were my grandmother's brothers, who along with her parents were killed in the Holocaust. My wife's father and grandmother were survivors, but were slave laborers during the Holocaust. My wife's father, my father-in-law, was under 10 years old when he and his mother were basically used as cooks for a squad of German soldiers throughout the duration of the war. And her mother was fortunate to be blonde and was renamed as Mary and was hidden throughout the war and managed to survive. And the first company that I worked for, first large company, was Commodore. The CEO of that company, Jack Trammell, was also a survivor, was used as a slave laborer. In fact, was known to have told some of his German executives that when they drove on the Autobahn that was his road, and when they said, no, the road belongs to the German people, he said, I built this road. He was used as a laborer on that Autobahn project. So, my grandmother's family lived in Poland, where before the war there were 9.5 million Jews. In Europe there were 9.5 million. In Poland there were 3 million Jews, and today there are about 15,000 left. So when we talk about the Holocaust, I think we need to really remember the carnage of innocent people that were taken away from their homes and just murdered and worked to death or just gassed to death right away. So it's not the usual joke I like to make during my sessions, but I just wanted to make sure that we really understand the substance of what we're remembering. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil. Don't be sorry. We appreciate you sharing and making Holocaust Remembrance Days so poignant.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wu.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just going to reflect on Neil's comments. Thanks.
Thanks. Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Neil, for sharing those comments.
Thank you.
I have nothing further.
Jim McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, for sharing your personal family story and for just kind of refocusing us on what happened and never again needs to mean something. So I appreciate that. I spent this weekend at a family funeral in North Carolina, so I just want to publicly extend condolences to the Serene family and the Finnegan family. He was a great guy. They had a beautiful celebration of life. He was a basketball coach in Cary, North Carolina, Wake County, Carolina, and one of his former players, who became one of his assistant coaches, went on to become a head coach himself, came and shared a personal story about how Uncle Jim used to coach and the belief that he had in him as a person and as a player and then as a coach. And it was just a really wonderful reminder how important it is to look around the people in your circle and lift them up. We all need somebody to believe in us, to help us believe in ourselves, and Uncle Jim was one of those people. So he will be missed, and that's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for sharing as well.
Yeah.
Jamil.
Just love, appreciation, and gratitude.
There we go.
All right. Well, I will just take a quick opportunity to remind everybody about the book festival coming up on May 18th, Saturday. We will feature 130 some odd of the greatest authors in the English language who happen to be touring at the moment. Please come on over and meet them, get books, which will be on sale on site, attend workshops for aspiring writers, tons of kids events, free to attend, free to park, all the details at GaithersburgBookFestival.org. And it's at Borough Park, by the way, I should have said that. And then in terms of upcoming meetings, we actually have the next couple of weeks off. We will not conduct sessions on April 22nd or April 29th. The next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, May 6th. And you can participate just as you did tonight, here in person or over Zoom. And I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. No report.
Okay. And no economic development?
No, he's on vacation.
He's on vacation, okay. The economy is on hold. Okay, then we will move on to ordinances, resolutions, and regulations. And we have Mauro Botetta, Aquatic Superintendent, to talk about replastering and caulking the Gaithersburg Water Park.
Correct. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As introduced, my name is Mauro Botetta. I'm the Aquatic Superintendent for the city here. I'm in charge of and overseeing the water park and the indoor aquatic center and the interactive water feature. I would like to bring to your attention an important matter regarding the maintenance and upkeep of our community chairs facility. Since 1990, the Gaithersburg Water Park has been cornerstone of leisure and recreation for the residents of the city of Gaithersburg. However, as the structure is subject to regular use and exposure to elements, our pool requires periodic maintenance and to ensure and continue safety, functionality, and aesthetic appeal. Upon careful inspection and assessment, it has come to our attention that the pool plaster that was last applied in spring renovation of 2012 is showing signs of wear and deterioration. As per usual standards, plaster coating typically has a lifespan of 7 to 10 years. Given that it's been over a decade has passed since the last replastering, it is imperative that we take proactive measures to address the issue promptly. In the light of foregoing, we propose undertaking a comprehensive replastering and caulking project for the Gaithersburg Water Park. This project will involve removing the existing plaster, application of new plaster to the pool surface, caulking of expanding joints, pool perimeter, and cracks to prevent water leakage and ensure structural integrity, and any necessary repairs to the pool infrastructure discovered during the process. High Sierra Pools, Inc. distinguished themselves through a thorough and competitive bidding process, demonstrating both the capacity and experience to deliver exemplary results. The track record of excellence in similar projects instills confidence in their ability to execute the replastering and caulking of the pool. We would like to award the contract to High Sierra Pools, Inc. Will commence so they can commence work promptly and adhere to the agreed upon timeline and specifications outlined in the contract. We trust that their efforts will yield outcomes that meet or exceed our expectations, ensuring the continued enjoyment and safety of who all use the water park. We are pleased to inform that the funds required for this essential maintenance project will be sourced from the PRC asset replacement budget. These funds have been embarked specifically for the purpose of insurance and continuing functionality and safety of our recreational facilities. By approving this proposal, the City of Gaithersburg will preserve the safety and integrity of the vital community asset, enhance the overall experience for residents and visitors utilizing the pool facilities. So in conclusion, I ask that the approval of the city manager to enter into contract with High Sierra Pools, Inc. for the replastering and caulking of the Gaithersburg Water Park.
Thank you very much. When is the intended time frame of this repair, this work?
So as soon as you guys were to approve it, High Sierra Pools will sign the contract and get to work as soon as possible.
So before the season starts,
yeah, so
this could all be completed?
Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, I noted that in the cover sheet, we can see that there were a couple of lower bids. There was one dramatically higher bid, but there was a couple of lower bids, and you referenced that this group was the most responsive and able to take care of the job?
Correct, yeah. So High Sierra Pools has completed similar projects in the same time span that we have. So this, again, the pool is opening up in 1 month. City Pools has completed similar projects, but their timeline was 180 days or more, which we do not have that time.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Jamil.
Just having reviewed a bunch of contracts in my life, current life and previous life, I really appreciate the best value approach to this than just lowest price. So just echoing the mayor, because sometimes the cheapest is not the best value for it. So yeah, thank you.
Kin.
If I remember correctly, Saybrook used High Sea Area to do this exact same thing to their pool when I was there. And I'm pretty confident that the project went right. I would just say be on top of them.
Okay, Lisa.
Thank you. Just your confidence in this getting done on time. Because if there's a delay in the opening, I can't imagine.
Oh, we're all in
the
trouble.
response to that.
Right, so I was talking to the project manager already, and I also talked to a pool that did the similar project last year up in Urbana, and they're more confident that they can handle this project with the time span that we've given them.
We definitely need to stay on top of them, though. Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say, I appreciate the level of detail you provided in supporting your decision or recommendation. Move approval. Oh, sorry.
Well, I don't know if Neil hasn't indicated.
No, I'm just wondering where the high bid came from. Were they bringing plaster of Paris from Paris? So I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next is from the city attorney. Frank, you got anything for us?
Well, I will say that with no other meeting in April, this will be my last fill-in. You will have a new city attorney for, I believe it's the May 6th meeting. And we have had the chance to meet with him, and I know you're looking forward to him, and we're looking forward to working with Darnell as well.
Thank you so much, Frank. And thank you for filling in and
Sure.
being so reliable, and we appreciate your work. Even when you're not here at the dais, we appreciate your work. We don't get to say that enough to you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anything from any other staff? Okay. Then I will remind everyone, we do not have meetings the next 2 Mondays. The next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, May 6th. And until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.